It's increasingly unsettled towards the northwest. First, we've got the winds picking up. That will certainly be noticeable across Northern Ireland and Scotland, with gales or even severe gales for exposed coasts of western Scotland. Then the rain arrives by dawn. But ahead of all of that, a different story for England and Wales. Here, lighter winds, clear spells and a bright start once again to Sunday. Again, a chilly start for many, especially for sheltered parts of central England and East Wales. But it stays mostly dry and bright for England and Wales. I think it will turn increasingly cloudy towards the west. Northern Ireland and Scotland, meanwhile, wet and windy weather increasingly pushes through here. Gales for exposed coasts and feeling unpleasant with that wind and rain. But 16, 17 Celsius for central and southeastern areas. In the sunshine, won't feel too bad at all for an October Sunday. Monday, mostly dry and bright for many once any early showers have eased away. Tuesday, a chilly start, but looking fine.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning, you're watching and listening to GB News. This is Saturday morning with Esther and Philip.
And we've got lots coming up for you this morning. We'll be discussing a controversial decision to keep sex and relationship education lessons a secret from a parent, trigger warnings at Oxford University, and we'll be joined by the author of a book looking into the leadership of Boris Johnson.
That plus much more after your latest headlines with Polly.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 10 o'clock in the GB newsroom. And the latest news this hour, 7 people are now confirmed to have died in an explosion which took place last evening at a petrol station in Ireland. Dougie Beattie is at the site of the explosion for us in County Donegal this morning. Dougie, what's the latest?
Hello, yes, welcome to Freesat in County Donegal. Very sad news from here. 7 people have lost their lives, 8 in hospital, and unfortunately, through covering the troubles in Northern Ireland for so very many years, you get to know what the emergency services are doing. I think that could probably rise slightly more. The recovery operation has now ended. The fire service is in attendance here because it is a petrol station, obviously, and they are looking to try and clear the site that is there now.
Dougie, what was the cause of this explosion? Is it known or is it under investigation?
It is under investigation at this moment in time. It is thought that it is a gas explosion but that has yet to be confirmed. As I've said, the whole focus of this was on the recovery of bodies and taking people away to have them treated in Letterkenny Hospital, just about 15 miles away from here. This is in the foothills of Mount Errigal. It is a very small village, and it's like a chain the whole way down into Letterkenny itself, and it will be felt the whole way through every one of those communities.
And Doogie, at what point will the emergency services be declaring this changing from a rescue operation to a recovery operation?
I would say within the next hour we will know that, and we will know the sort of final numbers. I think the village here, this was the only shop, the only petrol station, the only post office that was in it, and unfortunately it went off at 3:15 when school buses etc. had stopped here. So we can be sure of one thing: amongst the dead will be women and children.
Terribly sad news. Thank you for the update. We'll be back to you, of course, throughout the day for more. Doogie Beattie for the moment. Thanks very much indeed. Well, international news now, and a rail bridge linking occupied Crimea and Russia is on fire this morning, and the road bridge next to it has collapsed. Footage widely shared online shows an explosion on the Kerch Bridge, believed to have taken place early this morning. Travel across the bridge now, of course, impossible. An advisor to Ukraine's president describing the incident as the beginning, but not directly claiming Ukrainian responsibility. The bridge was opened 5 years ago following President Putin's illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. Here in the UK, around only 1 in 5 trains are expected to run today across Scotland, England and Wales. Members of the RMT union staging their 8th strike today in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The train operator's chief negotiator, Tim Shoveler, says passengers should only travel by train if absolutely necessary. The RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch warned of further strikes to come.
We will adapt and negotiate to new conditions, and we've adapted new technology all along. But that doesn't explain why these members standing behind me now haven't had a pay rise for 3 years, while the companies are extracting £500 million in profit last year.
The SNP's deputy leader will tell delegates at the party's conference today that the Prime Minister is a symptom of dysfunction at Westminster and not the cause. Keith Brown's speech will open the first in-person SNP conference since before the pandemic in Aberdeen. Mr Brown's also expected to condemn Labour, labelling the leader, Sir Keir Starmer, as just another Tony Blair. And slightly better news this morning. Liverpool has been confirmed as the host city for 2023's Eurovision Song Contest. I can just see around the corner, great big cheers coming up from Esther for that one. It beat Glasgow to host the music event next May. Ukraine, of course, winning last year's competition, but the organisers ruled it unsafe to host the show in the country, and it was decided the UK would host the contest as Sam Ryder came second in the competition so memorably. Liverpool's mayor has declared it will be the best party ever. No doubt about that. I'm back with more news soon. Now it's over to Esther.
Good morning. You're watching and listening to GB News this morning. It's Saturday morning with Esther and Phil. Polly was right. We were cheering from over here.
Coming up, we'll be looking back at the premiership of Boris Johnson with a political journalist who has published a brand new book documenting the highs and lows of the Johnson years.
And we'll be discussing a freshers' fair at Oxford University, which put trigger warnings on stalls to ensure students were not distressed during their visit.
And later on, we'll be joined by Cheryl Baker of Bucks Fizz fame, following the news that Liverpool will host the Eurovision Song Contest next year.
And as ever, we want to hear from you this morning. So if you want to get involved in the conversation, then email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
Before all of that, though, we're delighted to be joined in the studio by historian, writer and broadcaster Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Tessa, welcome.
Thank you.
What have you been seeing in the news?
Well, you can hardly miss this one in true tabloid style. The Mirror has gone for it, picking up on Biden's comments. The world on the brink. This is his reference, of course, the paralleling between the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 and what's going on right now with Vladimir Putin, who incidentally turned 70 this week. I don't know if you missed that. One of his very few friends.
I didn't get an invite to the party, that's for sure.
I think, why not? He was given apparently a mountain of watermelons by the Tajikistan leader and a tractor by Lukashenko in Belarus. But not many people saw him out and about. As we know, he's a bit of a rat in a trap, but he has huge amounts of power he can deploy. On the one front, these nuclear warheads. Interestingly, the figures here, I think, are contestable. The Mirror writes down that Russia has 6,255 potential nuclear warheads. I don't know where they get that statistic from, because actually none of us have been able to verify. But it's thought from more reliable sources that in total, even those that have now been set down, the total would be less than 6,000, and those that are available for deployment, 1,500. But bearing in mind, all of us, Russia and NATO, we were meant to be in this non-proliferation of nuclear weapons deal where we were de-escalating. It's hard to believe it's come to this.
I mean, do you think is this an exaggeration from Biden? Are we really close to the brink? Is it really sort of Cuban missile territory, or what do you think?
Well, do you know, Phil, in a way, I think a lot of us couldn't really believe he was going to invade Ukraine. I wouldn't put anything past a man, and I think that the pressure does escalate the more he is on the back foot. I think that the Ukrainian president articulated it very well yesterday, and he said he has his own people to fear. He has to look like the strong man. That is his image. He's got to be front-footing in a situation where right now we saw the bridge across to Crimea was detonated in the last 24 hours. It doesn't look good. The optics are dismal for him.
And then, does the rest of the world have to try and help him de-escalate in a way? Does this not make him fire up even more? We've seen the desperate acts, whether it's conscription of his people, what he's done, how he's brutally gone in, these fake referendums. He's tried everything, like you say, desperate. But do these headlines make it more inevitable or less? And I think that's what the rest of the world needs to think about.
It's interesting. It's like sort of poking a bear with a stick, isn't it? You think, how helpful is this?
Exactly
what I thought. It's a bit like, hey, taunting you, bet you won't dare. And actually, Vladimir said that yesterday, Zelensky said that yesterday, when he was asked to articulate whether he thought Putin would hit the button. He said, hey, I'm not going to give you a comment on that, effectively, is what he said. Because on the one hand, if I say he won't, then he'll go, what, you doubt me? And on the other hand, if I say he will, then he's boxed in a corner. You're right. It's dicey diplomatically. It really is. It's an extraordinary situation. And of course, we talk about that power, the nuclear potential power. And of course, we're all jumping about on the energy front, aren't we? My goodness. He may be on the back foot militarily, but he's got us by the short and curls.
And questions and confusion on who did actually disrupt and break down some of that Nord Stream. What was that? Was it him? Was it his competitors? And all of a sudden, you've got all conspiracies coming out. As I said, we need to close it down.
Talk about disinformation. You don't know what to believe where. And funnily enough, I'm for a big stake in Romania. I'm married to Romania and I work a lot out there. And they are much more cynical than we are about what they consider to be heavily westernised propaganda, even though they're in NATO. Oh, this is Biden fighting on our doorstep. So it's important to hold, I think, all the sort of perspectives. It's very easy from our point of view to see it as black and white, but it actually becomes much murkier the nearer to Ukraine you get.
Well, my story of the week, Tessa, and I'll be interested to get your take on this, is about a hospital. I don't think there's been enough coverage of this, to be perfectly honest. It's basically been about a hospital which is spending over £11,500 a month, came from an FOI request, paying 2 people to stand at the door of the hospital to hand out masks and sanitizer for everybody who walks in. This was just the staff cost, I understand, not including the costs of the masks.
Are we allowed to name the hospital?
Yes, we are.
Philip will.
I don't know if we are or not, but I'm going to, Tessa.
You're building up to the moment.
Exactly. This is the George Eliot Hospital in Nuneaton, where somebody put in an FOI request and this information came out. Now, the NHS is always saying, everyone's exhausted and they're at the end of their tether and they're understaffed and overstretched and whatever. And then you find out that they've got 2 people stood at the door handing out masks. Now, I should just say that if every hospital in the country did this, And over the course of a year, it would cost the NHS around £167 million a year, simply to have two people stood at the door, pointlessly, needlessly, handing out masks and sanitizer.
My question is, doesn't Nuneaton Hospital have a receptionist? Because normally when you go into your GP surgery now or your hospital, you're given a mask tossed over the perspex barrier. You know, they say, could you put this mask on if you don't already have one?
Yeah. Well, I also just wonder, is the organisation so big when you've got 1.3 million people? Did people still know they were working there doing this job? Because otherwise, it is a huge oversight to have two people employed at that cost doing that, isn't it?
It is, but it is easy to attack. I mean, and, you know, they're right there at the front. Wastage happens in every organisation. I'm going to push back a little bit here, Phil.
Not as much as not this kind of wastage. I mean, where did you get this kind of wastage anywhere else? Two people stood at the door, simply handing out masks, which you don't even need, handing out masks and sanitizer. I mean, what on earth are they doing?
Dare I say, I think probably in quite a lot of municipal buildings across Britain, you'd see equivalent wastage. But far be it from me to comment. By the way, why wasn't I offered a mask when I came into GB News this morning?
Because we don't do all that pointless rubbish.
I'm going to make an official complaint.
And by the way, it's no good for the lipstick. Now, mine also is sort of in that sort of medical sort of space. And I was shocked. It was this week, and it's rumbled on all week, about the nurse Miranda Hughes, where she said that people who voted Conservative, this was on a debate show on TV, Channel 5, people who voted Conservative did not deserve to be resuscitated. And I thought, how on earth did anybody feel comfortable saying that? And we are talking nearly 14 million people then that didn't deserve to be resuscitated.
I think 43% of the population voted for Boris Johnson.
That's what the figures were, nearly 14 million. But she's saying, if you voted Conservative, you should not be resuscitated. Could you say that about anybody else? Could you have said, if you were looking at age, if you were looking at race, if you were looking at religion? No. Would a TV programme have put it out on peak time TV if somebody had said that? I also thought you need to look at the recruitment process for people. Surely it's about caring for people, not having strong political views in what she did. So I thought HR needs to be looking at this. The people who were viewing the show said straight away there needs to be an investigation by the Nursing and Midwifery Council. But equally, I did see that her political ideology did only extend so far as she was now working in the private sector. That, or she thought more Tories went there, wasn't really sure.
But you see, Esther, I hear you. And she made a mistake, and it was crass, and it was ugly, and it was unfortunate. But at the same time, she's not media trained. She was a nurse. And I thought the pile-on afterwards has felt also uncomfortable. You know, obviously, anybody who goes and receives regular or even intermittent treatment at the NHS, most staffing and care professionals are delightful, and I've never been interrogated about my politics. And I felt she was slightly hung up to dry, just to push back there.
Coming back to Esther's point, if she'd have said that about people's race, that people of a certain race shouldn't be resuscitated, or religion shouldn't be resuscitated.
I am not justifying the comment.
Then, I mean, she would have been hung out to dry even further, wouldn't she? But it seems that to say it's about, you know, Conservatives, that's
Indeed, but I think she has been attacked. But it wasn't fine. Look how we've all got very upset about it. And I think she's lost her job, hasn't she?
And rightly so, yes, she did.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, going back to your point then, you know, was she whipped up in a way to say these comments? I believe she'd been on TV before and she'd said sort of comments that was maybe slightly outrageous or made a bigger point than she was meant to. But in that case, then you're saying she was owed a duty of care by the TV show. She obviously knew she was being come to for a statement. Had they prepared that statement, what she was going to say? So then the question's even bigger again. That a TV station thought it was fine and brought somebody on to say that, and it's not fine.
Yeah, so again, I would point to her vulnerability in this context. Yes, she said the wrong thing, it was repugnant, and it shouldn't have been repeated or broadcast, but also she is a vulnerable individual woman now without a job, costing the state money.
Tessa, thank you very much. We'll see you at 11 o'clock.
For more punchy reaction from Tessa. Fantastic. Now, in a landmark decision, the Information Commissioner's Office has overruled government guidance and blocked the right of a parent to see the sex and relationship education material being taught in her daughter's school.
The ICO ruled that parents of children at Haberdashers Hatcham College did not have the right to see the details of sex education lessons being taught by external providers, despite governmental guidance stating that schools must ensure that parents know what will be taught and when.
Campaigner Claire Page, who made a complaint to the ICO about the content of lessons being taught in her daughter's school, said the ruling breaks down the fundamental trust required between parents and state funded schools and fails to deliver the transparency that the government says schools must provide.
Well, we're delighted to say that Claire joins us now. Claire, thank you very much indeed for coming in. I mean, how did this start? What was it that about the sex education and relationship education in the school that was concerning you?
Yes, it began last September when the government introduced new RSE regulations, so that's relationships and sex education. And they made that compulsory, but there were some things that parents could choose to withdraw their children from. And our school responded by offering a lesson on consent. And I elected for my daughter to receive that lesson. It seemed like a good idea. And we weren't told very much about it. It was just presented as something that would be of high quality by a trusted provider that has come in from outside the school. And it would meet DFE regulations, so fine. And I suppose I was a little concerned when my daughter returned from that lesson and explained that she'd been told that we live in a heteronormative world. This is a really bad thing.
Now, you might have to explain what they're sort of trying to say to people. Heteronormative world. Go on.
Yeah, well, you know, these things are open to these definitions are open to contention anyway, but largely speaking, the idea is that it's a world that expects everyone to be heterosexual or to be a man and a woman only and to have heterosexual relationships and perhaps frown on other ways of going about life. And so they asserted that that's the problem with our society. And actually, the way you should respond to that is to be sex positive in your attitude to relationships. So my thinking about that was that these were very ideological positions. And of course, in schools, teachers should not give their ideology to children as fact. You can give ideas and discuss them, but you shouldn't indoctrinate, really. So I just asked the school, could I please see that lesson plan and, you know, understand the actual words, images that were used. And the response was that the commercial interests of that provider would trump my interest as a parent to see the material, and so it had to be kept secret for commercial reasons. That was, you know, I suppose that concerned me in the sense that if there was a provider who knew they were coming to teach children, why would they not want to show what they were teaching to parents as well? So I made a Freedom of Information request to school, and it was turned down. And I also, at that point, had a good look on the provider's website to try and understand, you know, where they're coming from, and found three, you know, I think really concerning things. The first is that the website was full of ideological claims, which, you know, breaks the Education Act, really. And then the second was that it had some really sexually explicit lesson plans, and which I actually can't even describe on a morning TV show, and yet they were there on a children's education website. And then the third thing is that they linked with live links through to their own private concerns on other websites where they were selling sex toys, promoting 18+ pornography, and giving sex advice about every kind of masturbation in the most graphic detail.
So, you felt let down as a parent then? And who were you sort of most angry with? The school? Maybe you could have nipped it in the bud if they had shown you the lessons, or you could have had a conversation with them. You know, the ICO for not backing. Where did you felt at a loss, and who did you feel most angry at?
Well, it's hard to say in a way, because all parties, I think, had such a strong conviction about what ought to be taught, really for social justice reasons, that nobody could see that there were some alarming elements to this teaching. And so that there was denial from absolutely everybody that there was any problem at all, that a sex educator would have what are conflicting interests, really. And, yes.
I guess the worrying thing is that this seems to go against the government advice. I mean, it's up on the government website. It says that schools should ensure that they engage parents and that they provide examples of the resources they plan to use. For example, the books they will use in lessons. And so this school and the Information Commission are going against, it seems, everything that it says on the government website about the right of parents to see this stuff.
Yes, that's the really remarkable thing. And I'm quite stunned by the Information Commissioner's choice on this. They have gone directly against what the DFE and the Secretary of State want. And against parents, really, that, you know, all of the parents, I can't think of any parent who would think it was okay to have secrets about what their child was taught. And it wasn't just the material, actually. I asked to know who taught my child, the identity of the person, so that I could know whether it was or the person who has conflicting interests. And I was told that that also should be kept secret to protect their privacy. And that was prioritised over safeguarding.
Are you appealing the decision of the Information Commissioner's Office? Are you appealing that decision?
I am hoping to appeal the decision. I think I would need to crowdfund for it. I've spoken to a lawyer about that, and I think it is something that should be done. I think parents should stand up for...
You've got to do it pretty sharpish as
You
well.
can appeal to the first-tier tribunal, but you've got to do it within 28 days of the information.
That's right, yes.
So you've got to do it
yes,
sharpish.
I'm already getting on to that. But in a way, I think what I would really like is for the Education Department, for the Secretary of State to step in and actually lay out to schools that they should not work with anyone who wants to keep secrets from parents. It's the wrong thing to do.
Claire, thank you very much indeed for coming and sharing that with us.
And what a
today.
journey you've been on through all this. And look, we'll hopefully speak to you soon if you do take that appeal and find out what happens after that.
But parents should be alerted to the fact that they may not be able to see this material if they want to.
That's right.
Coming up after the break, we'll be joined by the author of a brand new book about former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, so don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to the show. Lots of you have been getting in touch already, Phil.
Raquel says it's absolutely abhorrent that the nurse felt it acceptable to make such a grotesque statement about not resuscitating those who vote Conservative. This is not about freedom of speech. She is a danger to the public and broke the Nightingale Code. She deserves to be fired and should be struck off.
And Carol, on the same subject, as a trained nurse, she has to abide by the Nurses' Code of Professional Conduct. She broke it. Her employer had no choice. She should also be removed from the register.
And Amanda says Boris needs to come back. If the Conservatives want to continue, they will have to bring back Boris, which leads us very nicely on.
Certainly does. Well done, Phil.
Thank you, Amanda. To a brand new book looking into the premiership of Boris Johnson, which has been released by Andrew Jimson. And we're delighted to say he joins us now to tell us all about it. There it is, available in all good bookshops and bad ones, we think, too. So
this wasn't you naming yourself Amanda to send in this comment.
No, that would be much too clever. Yes.
So,
yes,
Andrew, what's your verdict on the Boris Johnson time in office?
Well, he was an insurgent. He was a brilliant rebel. Before he became Prime Minister, he was a brilliant rebel in the referendum. The vote leave would probably not have happened without him. And he was a brilliant rebel when he got into number 10 and he got Brexit done. But then he was like a sort of guerrilla fighter who couldn't quite adapt to commanding regular troops, which is a quite different thing. The Whitehall machine, the gears all ground because he'd decide one thing at 8:30 and then another thing at 10:30, and the officials didn't know what was happening. Number 10 was chaotic, and out he's gone. But I think he's a much more brilliant man than the people who just get very, very angry with him about Brexit. They've never understood that he is one of the great communicators of our time.
How well do you know him? What's your relationship with Boris?
I'm not a close friend, and there's lots of critical stuff about him in this book. Lots of stuff. When I did my first book about him, he said in an aggrieved tone, "You've done quite enough work to avoid the charge of sycophancy." But I did. I'm 6 years older than him, but I met him in 1987 when he was leaving university, and I met his then girlfriend, and she said, "Could you meet my boyfriend? He's trying to get into journalism." So I met Boris, and I would certainly not. I mean, he's very good at saying thank you. So any number of people helped him get into journalism, and of course he helped himself too. And he was already operating at a higher level than me. But he left each of us with the heartwarming impression that we were solely responsible for launching him. And he had to be launched twice, actually, because he got a traineeship on the Times. He was sacked for making up a quote about Edward II. And then he had to be relaunched on the Daily Telegraph. And Max Hastings saved him. And sent him to Brussels and gave him his big chance to write about how Jacques Delors was trying to take over Europe.
Still friends with Max?
Well, I haven't seen Max lately.
No, not you, Boris.
Sorry. No, Max, from about 2012, started to denounce... and Max made a very serious threat. He said he would move to Argentina if Boris ever became Prime Minister. But as far as I know, he's still living near Hungerford. So it's a bit of a... I mean, all that means is that we journalists sometimes exaggerate. I mean, it was a good line. Yeah. Anyhow, the fact that Max and many other commentators started to denounce him so seriously, they really thought there was a danger. It was a compliment to him, actually. It helped to put him on the map, and it helped to show that he could tease people who many members of the public wanted to be teased, the prigs, or the people who are adopting a priggish, high-minded, pious tone.
How would you describe Boris Johnson's political beliefs? I mean, I once asked him, how would you define Johnsonism?
Yes.
And I think he just mentioned levelling up, and that was about it.
Yes, no, he loves...
Is he a liberal? Is he a libertarian?
Well, he has a deep belief in freedom.
Apart from during COVID?
Apart from during COVID, yes. He's a Tory Democrat, actually, which is what Disraeli was, which is the greatness of Britain. So it's patriotism, above all, love of the royal family and the armed forces, plus measures to improve the life of the working class, which is the rather dreary levelling up bit, but very important. And that's why those Labour voters reckoned he was a better bet. Plus teasing the sort of Guardian reading classes who think that they can tell the rest of us how to behave.
Because, of course, people, talk about during the Brexit referendum that he wrote these 2 articles, one in favour of... And, I mean, did he... What's your assessment of his Euroscepticism? Was it more passionate than people believe, or was it opportunistic, as some people allege? What's your...
Well, of course, he saw which way the wind was blowing, and he seized an opportunity. But I think he was genuinely both... I mean, he's not like you, Phil, an absolutely principled upholder of national sovereignty, but he does think, on the whole, we should be running our own affairs and should be able to sack our own government and all that sort of stuff. But he's also culturally very keen on Europe, and he actually sort of knows Latin and Greek and French and can get along in various other European languages. So he's very, very keen on European culture, and he lived there as a boy, and so his attitude is difficult to convey in a single word.
Is this part of his problem as well, then, that there are so many things he can be, there are so many sides to him, so many angles to him, that people didn't know if it was genuine or if it was not, if it was him writing another article or not? Is this part of maybe his downfall?
I think it is. I think that people didn't know where he stood certainly on economic questions. I mean, obviously, he's very much in favour of going for it, and boosterism was a big bit of it, and keen on spending money. And I think there he was right that, I mean, actually, that was on the side of the vote leave bus, of course. We can spend more money on the NHS. And the NHS is a great national, I mean, it's the national health service. It's it's the national institution, probably, which is closest to the hearts of a great many voters. And he realised that actually people people didn't want sort of Singapore on Thames. They didn't want a minimal state, which was leaving everything to private enterprise and private individuals. They do need, particularly if you're less well off, you need good health, you want good school for your children, all that obvious stuff, but that costs money.
Interesting, you've hit on money there, because you'd say as an individual,
yes,
he wasn't very good with money. And if you look at his
he's good at
lifestyle and spending it, or maybe he just overspends.
You're very censorious, Esther. He's very good at making money. And actually, he's quite tight about spending it.
Oh, is that what it is?
He's not a great man to... I mean, if you happen to be in a pub with him, you may well find that his round of drinks has mysteriously not been bought. But then, in any case, he doesn't want to hang around in the pub.
But you know him very well anyway. This is a very
I do know him quite
authoritative
well.
book.
Yes, oh yes, it's the inside story. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and talking about it, and we wish you very well with the book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Right, well, it was reported this week that Oxford University Students' Union placed trigger warnings on freshers' fare stalls, which students could find distressing. They also reportedly installed a well-being zone for anyone who felt uncomfortable at the event.
In a message posted on social media, the union said it was not able to ban any society from having a stall at the fair, but it wanted to reassure students that it had put the support in place to ensure the welfare of those students.
Well, to discuss this story further, we're now joined by the Director of Academics for Academic Freedom, Professor Dennis Hayes.
Good morning.
Well, a lot of us think, what a load of nonsense. I mean, what were you putting, or was trigger warnings getting put on?
Well, I think you spotted what was new about this. I mean, the Students' Union did recognise that they couldn't, with the passage of the Higher Education Free Speech Bill, ban student societies because they didn't agree with their ideas. So they've made the therapeutic turn, which I've talked about many times. They've decided that the way to get their own way and to censor in a slightly, seemingly more compassionate way is to worry about student mental health and their well-being, and the room that's put aside so that people can go and chill out if they feel distressed. But it shows what a contemptuous attitude they have to their peers. They're treating them as children. And the other surprising thing, and commentators have mentioned this, that this isn't the management or academics saying that students can't cope. It's actually students saying that students can't cope. But of course, that's misleading, because students are now just part of university management, students' unions. They're on every committee, they're on recruitment committees, so they're effectively part of management. But it did make me think of something that was slightly more worrying about this, because if it becomes the case that we start to censor by being concerned about people's emotional hurt, then we're going to lead to a situation which might actually put an end to the university as we know it. I was thinking about this before I came on, and the university is a particularly unique institution. It's a voluntary community of adults, a voluntary community of adults that are seeking to pursue knowledge. So they're different than a school, and they're different than a workplace. So it's a completely unique environment, but we may be going to see the end of it, and I can explain why if you wish.
Dennis, I just thought, I mean, obviously, people start complaining when people refer to the snowflake generation, and then you hear something like this and people immediately think of it. I always thought that the whole point of universities was that students being exposed to different ideas, views, principles, arguments. That was the whole point of you going to university, to try and broaden your horizons, not just basically let you stay...
Be shielded away from something you don't agree with.
Silo and everything. Shouldn't universities be doing an awful lot more to force their students to engage with opinions that they might feel uncomfortable with?
Well, I think universities have bought into the therapeutic culture. I mean, they don't see that as their job anymore. Hence the Higher Education Free Speech Bill, which is trying to bring students and the universities into a position where they will actually promote free speech. And that's a desperate situation. So things have changed. I agree entirely that that's what the university should be. And in some instances, it is. But there's been a big move.
Dennis, if a trigger a warning doesn't work, is this now enabling students to maybe sue the student union if a wellbeing room didn't help them, the trigger warning didn't help them? I mean, where does this end up?
Well, that's what we're going to get in the position where students will start suing about all sorts of issues. And it's actually happening now because there have been challenges to universities for not protecting people's free speech because they didn't protect their well-being. And I think you could just see a situation, and the concern with mental health that universities have is going to bring about a situation where academics are going to be placed in loco parentis. So they'll have to treat students as if they're their own children. And that will be the end of the university. You can see what's going to happen because we'll no longer treat them as adults. And I think we have to start saying, what Phil has just said. The university is a place where you're going to be exposed to new ideas. There's a very great statements made in America about this for universities, and people have come out and said it. But then they get attacked because actually saying what Phil has just said can be seen as hurtful. The fact you're saying I should be exposed to ideas. So even arguing for free speech has become a problem. And I think, so that's the problem we have. But the only way around it is to actually stand up and speak for free speech. I mean, the new Vice-Chancellor of Sussex University said recently that that should be the role of universities. But she had a caveat. She said that lots of academics and Vice-Chancellors and managers wanted to say that that should be the role of university, but they couldn't in the cacophony of public debate because there's so much debate about free speech. These academics and managers can't speak about free speech. The absurdities that people get themselves into. But I think we should say, free speech, no ifs, no buts. That's what university should be about.
Absolutely. Dennis, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, coming up after the break, we'll be joined by Lee Anderson to discuss blue-collar conservatism. So don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 10:40. Now, during the 2019 general election, many working-class voters changed their allegiance from Labour to Conservative for the first time. Someone who also made that journey is former Labour councillor and now Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson, who last week at the conference was made the new chairman of the Blue Collar Conservative Group, and he joins us now. So, Lee, great for you to be here with us. I want to know, can Liz Truss appeal to the blue-collar voters as much as Boris Johnson did?
It's a tough act to follow, is Boris, because he did reach right across the country, quite right, rest of morning, Phil. But she's got a job on her hands. But that said, you know, we all have a responsibility who sit on those green benches behind Liz to make sure that we can reach out to the red wall voters and connect and have those serious and honest conversations that made 5 million people vote Conservative for the first time. Look, and if we don't blame the Prime Minister. I'm going to blame people like myself. You know, I'm embedded in my community, in a working class community, a traditional Labour heartland. You know, if I reach out and speak and deliver on the promises made, then we should be okay.
So, Lee, what do you think, Liz, if you speak to Liz Truss, what would you say is the policies that she needs to adopt in order to make sure that those 5 million people that you just referred to who voted Conservative for the first time do so again next time?
Well, I think we've already got the policies, Phil. We just need to deliver on them. I think a big one for me in an area like Ashfield is the small boats. That's massive, absolute massive inquiry in my inbox at the moment. We've not gone on top of it. Hopefully now with a new Home Secretary who's making the right noises, we can get on top of that. Upskilling, a big problem in my constituency with employers that I visit on a weekly basis to say that they struggle to recruit people. Now, we're still stuck in Ashfield 30 odd years after Blair introduced his tax credit system. It made it so easy for people to get trapped into entry-level jobs, stop on 16 hours and get their wages topped up. You know, an unintended consequence of that is now we've got people in the 50s who are still doing the same jobs as they did in the 20s. That's no good for the people that stuck on entry-level pay, and it's no good for the employers either. So we've got to have that recognition that we're wasting talent in this country. And the previous Prime Minister, and I know the current Prime Minister has said it, that the talent is spread evenly across this country, but opportunity is not. And it's up to us to make sure that that opportunity is there.
I mean, obviously the biggest controversy that's happened since Liz Truss became Prime Minister was her now abandoned tax cut for the richest people. How does that go down with people in Ashfield and with sort of blue-collar Conservatives?
Well, let's be honest, it's all about the message. I think sometimes as politicians, Esther, Phil, and all of us, I think we're a little bit arrogant in how we explain things to people. Look, the policies might be the right thing to do, but politically and the optics aren't always great. So we got that wrong. But that said, it doesn't look good. You know, in places like Ashfield, where a lot of people are earning minimum living wage on 25 to 30 grand, just about managing salaries in Ashfield, when they see the optics, and the mainstream media don't help either, but when they see that the richest in society are going to get the biggest break, they think it's a little bit unfair. But I will say this. I'm not against tax cuts across the board, and I don't mind people being rich because rich people employ people, and I've worked for rich people before. But you know what, saying that, Phil, we're in a difficult time. We've got to move forward, and like I say, in future, if government can get the comms better, get the messaging right and explain to people what we're doing, what the journey is and where we want to get to, then maybe in the future we can get away with things like this.
Well, you know what they need, Lee? They need you doing comms. And like you said, you're not going to blame anybody else. Great Conservative sort of personal responsibility there. You're going to take the message out. You're going to say what's right and wrong and feed it back either way. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the show today.
Now, for many years, Queen Camilla was portrayed in a poor light, blamed by the public for the breakup of the marriage between Prince Charles and Lady Diana. Initially, the Queen refused to see or speak to her. But after the death of Prince Philip, the Duchess became one of the Queen's closest companions.
That's according to royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin, who has just released a brand new book titled Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, From Outcast to Future Queen Consort. And we're delighted to say Angela joins us now. So, hello, Angela. Hello. How did she manage to go on that journey?
It's absolutely extraordinary. I can't believe what she's been through. I don't think many women could have gone through what she went through. Very happy home, loads of friends, no necessary aims because she had lots of money, and then to be vilified, called the most hideous woman in the world. And that was a time when she was with Prince Charles, but she had no protection because they didn't have an engagement or they weren't married. So people would be crowding round her if she went to the supermarket, throwing things at her. People would be outside her house. Absolutely hideous, but she sort of survived it. And the survival was very interesting because actually when they did get married, after the ceremony, they walked up the stairs in Windsor and they both burst into tears. And I have that from one of their most popular aides. And I just thought to myself, you know, so much tension. Would it happen? Camilla was very scared that no one would turn up at the wedding because they had a normal wedding, not a church wedding. And she refused to get out of bed in the morning of the wedding day. She just couldn't cope. She's a woman who can cope, and this was too much. But to see both of them really weep, it must have been extremely moving. And I wanted to do the book because I think that it's extremely unfair of the Crown to see her as some hideous...
This is the Netflix
woman.
TV series.
Netflix TV series. I saw that in episode 3, and I felt the series 3, and I thought it was incredibly unfair. But she's brilliant at actually overcoming such things. And she had a big reception at Clarence House, which she does quite a lot. And she invited the actress along as well, who thought maybe she was going to be sent to the Tower afterwards. And she gave a speech and she said, I'm very pleased that she's here because if I sort of fall over and don't make it, she'll be able to take over from me. So everybody roared with laughter. And of course, it sort of said, this is all nonsense.
Yeah.
What they're doing is nonsense.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Camilla's. I always have been, actually. I always thought that she looks like a very, you know, nice person, a decent person. How did she win over the Queen?
Well, she won over the Queen by not saying anything, not speaking out, not complaining. I'm not saying she did this to win over the Queen. This was what she was like. And she started doing lots of engagements. And when she felt she could really help people in a positive way, she doesn't cut ribbons, she doesn't just say, hello, here I am, and nip off after 5 minutes. She says, one of the CEOs of a domestic violence charity said to me, she asked, when she says, what can I do to help? She doesn't just go away, she then does it to help. So she's been terrific. And the more work she'd done, she didn't want a career, but once she started doing this, the more she loved it. And she's now works well, it might change now she's Queen, but incredibly hard to help people in difficult situations.
And talking about people in difficult situations, and if she is a helper and a healer, I'm looking now at the news about the reconciliation that's hopefully going to go on between Harry, Meghan, Wills and Kate, maybe coming back into the royal family, maybe cutting out bits of that Netflix sort of documentary, getting rid of some of the bits in the book so they can come back in the royal family. Will she help with that?
Well, it's very interesting because her belief is you never ditch your family. You always leave the door open so that if they want to come back, you know, they can. I think that's a very important feeling that she has. But I think they've got to have respect. Harry and Meghan have got to change the way they're doing things. They haven't got to think about me, me, me. And of course, this nonsense about whatever the real royal family do, they try and copy it.
Which we saw with those photos, which were a strange set of photos.
Yes, Harry always behind Meghan. And also the one in black and white, which actually, if you just look at the top, is exactly the same as the Queen and King for a stamp. And you think, for goodness sake, I still think they want to crash and smash the royal family as we know it to pieces. But I think that she understands as a parent that you can love your child but really not like what they're doing.
But I was going to say that reconciliation, though, because they are quite savvy, a bit like the Queen didn't want a picture with Lilibet. They have said the reconciliation will come after we've seen what you've delivered to the papers and to the publishing world.
Well, that's why Harry and Meghan are going very anxious about what's in Harry's book and what the Netflix thing about them is going to be. Of course, the very fact that they've been nasty, to me, doesn't matter whether it's pre or after the Queen. It's just horrible that they've done this. It's so if the Queen's now dead, they take it out. But if she was still alive, she would have to read this nasty, spiteful stuff. That's what it's Well, that's what it's alleged to be, but we don't know.
I was just going to add in one more thing. They love legal battles,
Yes,
don't they,
not us.
Meghan and Harry? I just wonder whether they might have the tables reversed on them by Netflix, who will want all of that information in there, and it has been delivered.
Yes. Well, they can take no notice, can't they? They can't. They would have to take legal action against them, which I don't see how they can do that, because then they would just fall through. They have nothing left to offer.
Angela, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just thought we'd talk about Meghan. It's in stark contrast, isn't it, to Kate, who the way she dealt with that protester in Ireland, with such poise and elegance and all the rest of it, just sort of, to me, showed the difference between sort of Meghan and Kate, really.
And sort of de-escalated a situation rather than inflamed one and gone into competition with.
With it very well.
Well, we're delighted also to be joined in the studio now by friend of the show as well, Andrew Eborn, to look at some of the biggest stories this week from the legal world.
Lovely to see you both. Fantastic. In the orange as well. And I tell you what, the last few days have had a cornucopia of cases. We've had Kim Kardashian and her cryptocurrency crisis. But do you remember she was fined at 1.26 million as a result?
Advertising, as it was.
Advertising without telling what she was advertising.
There, by the way.
An avalanche of alliteration. I love it. Did you spot that? It's got to be good. We've got Trump in court again. He's suing CNN for an absolute fortune for the millions as well. But I've been cruising the Med on the good ship Azura, and I stopped in a few places along my way. I stopped in Athens, and I spoke about Athens, about the rules there and the regulations about holidays. You might remember that you can't wear my stilettos around the Acropolis. But the reason I mention that is that in 2004, it was, Usain Bolt made his Olympic debut in Athens. And he will famously, as you know, his wonderful victory pose that he does, the idea there, he's now trying to trademark that. Being inspired by Mobot, you remember Mo Farah, who actually got the idea from Claire Balding, you might remember.
I think I prefer the shooting of the arrow rather than the...
that was actually from YMCA, from the Village People. That's where he got the idea from, Claire Balding.
Remember that, do you?
I love it. Remember, I played it this morning, getting up. It's got to be good. But that sort of side, looking at people's money, Gareth Bale as well, he's got the Hearts 11. They've all trademarked these victory symbols. And as a result of it, they can earn an absolute fortune because they're going to be licensing them in different ways. Usain Bolt is doing the same sort of thing. So I went to see him in Athens. We went along to Nike as well. Ephesus is where it was, where the original marble relief of Nike, who's the goddess of victory, and Nike themselves have taken, if you look at the swoosh on her dress, that's where they've taken a little tick from. And they've done that sort of side. But that sort of business, it's multi-millions, billions for the whole industry itself, millions for those concerned. Michael Jordan, for example.
What does it mean, though, in practice, though, Andrew? I mean, you've just done the Mo Farah. Are you now going to get sued by Mo Farah?
Well, I love it. Bring it on. Bring it on.
I mean, what does it mean in practice?
What it means in practice, a trademark gives you the exclusive right in certain classes to do things. So, for example, I own the trademark to the word octopus in certain classes, named after my company. I also own the trademark to the word failure. So if anybody fails, they have to get a license from me as a result of it. What happens is it's only in certain classes. So what they've done is they put it on merchandise. So this is not a merchandise. When Mo Farah wants to license the right to do the Mobot, he will get revenue stream from that. Interesting, what's happening when you talk about the metaverse and new revenue streams, he's now done that in computer games. And you look at the way that certain cases, for example, in music, you'll remember very well the floss dance. There's been a big thing where Epic Games did this wonderful computer game called Fortnite, which zillions of people have played around the world. And you can buy what are called emotes for your character to do certain moves and so on and so forth. Been lots of cases talking on the legal side about dance moves and saying dance moves themselves, such as the floss, aren't protected by copyright, but if it goes into a whole routine, then it would get copyright protection. So a trademark is an extra level of that. The key is, as always, get the rights right. So we can help with that sort of side, make that make sense.
Now, there was an article in the paper today about somebody who'd sold a painting for £1 million, and it was resold a few months later for £9 million, and they're wanting to sue the people who sold it for them.
Absolutely. I know.
Now, is this...
well, it's a glorious thing, because you're right. The painting was £1 million by Chardin. and they weren't quite sure it was a Chardin, original Chardin or a fake Chardin. So
they sold it anyway.
They sold it anyway. £500,000, I'm not quite sure. And it's by the Earl and Countess of Weymouth, or rather Wemyss, because they did miss out on
Very good.
on millions. It was subsequently resold for £9 million, so huge profit. And they're now trying to sue the person involved. And this is he's doing his own little gesture, if you like, Simon Dickinson. It looks like a Usain Bolt thing, so he gets himself into trouble. They're suing him, and he's turned around, in all honesty, and what he says, a lovely quote: "The possibility of huge gains being made on the sale of the right piece to the right buyer is the nature of the art world." So I'm not sure how many two fingers up was up to them, but it should be.
Surely it's the
should be
free
invested on
market,
that basis.
if you want to sell it and somebody offers you £1 million, you're happy to sell it for £1 million. You can't then bellyache when somebody else sells it for...
They're saying, and this is the argument, and now Casey's, because all QCs have become Casey's, as you know, they're being represented by Andrew Onslow, who's saying there were breaches of duty. This particular art dealer should have told them it's worth a little bit more, and it might be a real one, but I'm not quite sure that's how it works, is it?
Well, you could also go to other people yourself to get it valued,
Absolutely.
see if anybody else wants to buy it, and maybe he's saying, my value is that I know all these people who I might be able to sell it to. Unfortunately, it was done in 6 months and not 6 years. But I do think I wouldn't be selling something at that price with only one person valuing it. I would have gone to a whole host of people to value something that expensive.
You're absolutely right, Esther. And also, just imagine if it worked the other way.
Yes.
Just imagine they got $9 million and the art dealer turned around and said, well, hang about, I only sold it for $1 million. Can I have my $8 million back? You've got to work on that basis. A deal is a deal. Make sure it's properly documented and you'll avoid these problems.
I quite agree. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much for that update. Now, that's it for the first hour of the show, but don't go anywhere because we'll be back after this short break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning and welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Phil here on GB News. Coming up this hour,
we'll be joined by a mortgage expert to talk about the current housing situation in the UK. We'll also be looking at the legacy of the Beatles as their debut single, Love Me Do, celebrates its 60th birthday.
All of that, plus much more, after your latest headlines with Polly.
Esther and Phil, thank you. Good morning to you. 7 people are now confirmed to have died in an explosion which took place last evening at a petrol station in Ireland. Dougie Beattie is at the site of the explosion for us in County Donegal this morning. Dougie, what's the latest?
Well, hello and welcome to Creeshla, a small village in the northwest of Donegal. It is in mourning this morning 7 are now dead here. 4 bodies recovered through the night. It happened after an explosion at the petrol station behind me here. It is the only shop in this village. It's the post office, it's the deli counter, it's everything to everybody here. This village is only about a mile long, and it's one of many villages that stretches the whole way down into the main population of Donegal that lives in Letterkenny. So many of the school buses and so forth that come through here will be dropping people off that are related to many families here, and that was at 3:15, right in the height of that. So we can presume that more than likely that some of the people on that bus will be children and probably caught in amongst these explosions.
Sad day for the community there, Doogie, and of course people will be asking questions. How did this happen?
Well, as yet, they have not concentrated on that, although it is behind me. You can see some of the heavy lifting equipment and all starting to now be brought out of the area. And you would imagine at that point that then the investigators will go in and have a look at exactly what happened here. It is thought that it was a gas explosion that caused it, but nobody is saying too much at this moment in time.
Doogie Beattie for the moment. Thanks very much indeed. Well, in other news today, a rail bridge linking occupied Crimea and Russia is on fire this morning, and the road bridge next to it has collapsed. Footage widely shared online shows an explosion on the Kerch Bridge, believed to have taken place early on this morning. Travel across that bridge now impossible, as you can imagine. And an advisor to Ukraine's President Zelensky describing the incident as the beginning, but not exactly, claiming Ukrainian responsibility. The bridge was opened 5 years ago following President Vladimir Putin's illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014. We'll bring you more on that story, of course, as it comes to us. Well, here in the UK, around 1 in 5 trains are expected to run today across the network, as in Scotland, England and Wales, union members go on strike. Members of the RMT union are staging their 8th strike, in fact, today in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The train operator's chief negotiator, Tim Shoveler, says passengers should only travel by train if absolutely necessary. RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch warned of further strikes to come.
We will adapt and negotiate to new conditions, and we've adapted new technology all along, but that doesn't explain why these members standing behind me now haven't had a pay rise for 3 years, while the companies are extracting £500 million in profit last year.
Mick Lynch. Now, the SNP's deputy leader will tell delegates at the party's conference that the Prime Minister is a symptom of the dysfunction at Westminster, not the cause. Keith Brown's speech will open the first in-person SNP conference since before the pandemic in Aberdeen. Mr Brown also expected to condemn Labour, labelling the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, as just another Tony Blair. Now, let me just bring you the next story. Thousands of people will form a human chain around Parliament calling for the release of the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange. Mr Assange is currently being held in Belmarsh Prison in London amid a legal battle to avoid extradition to the United States. He's wanted in America over the leak of secret military information. Former PR advisor Richard Hillgrove says it's important for journalism that Assange is freed.
The fact that this is being led not so much from Don't Extradite Assange again, but the National Union of Journalists and the International Federation of Journalists, which has 600,000 members globally, leading this exercise means, the penny is dropping that this is not, this is political. This puts journalism in the firing line. If Assange goes down, journalism goes down.
And just lastly, entertainment news for you. Liverpool has confirmed as the host city for the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest. It beat Glasgow to host the music event next May. Ukraine, of course, won last year's competition, but organisers ruled it unsafe to host the show in the country for obvious reasons. And it was decided the UK would host the contest as Sam Ryder came in second in the competition. Liverpool's mayor has declared it will be the best party ever. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Esther and Philip.
Welcome back to Saturday Morning with Esther and Philip. We've got a fantastic hour of TV lined up for you coming up.
We'll be joined by a mortgage expert to talk about the current housing situation in the UK and what people can do to get their feet on the property ladder.
As the Beatles' debut single Love Me Do turns 60, we'll be discussing the enduring legacy of the Beatles with a music journalist.
And we'll be joined by Cheryl Baker of Bucks Fizz fame following the news that Liverpool is now to host the Eurovision Song Contest next year.
And as ever, we want to hear from you this morning. So get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
And lots of you have been getting in touch this morning. Julie says, I would suggest if you haven't got the ability to deal with alternative views, then perhaps you're just not mature enough to go to university and cope with university. That's when we were talking about these trigger warnings of the Freshers' Fair and well-being rooms at university.
And Andrew Jimson's book about Boris Johnson has certainly stimulated some contrasting views, I think it might be fair to say, about Boris. Andrew says, very selective with the truth about Boris. Self-opinionated people who either ignore what a large amount of the electorate think or convince themselves everyone agrees with them should not be taking advantage of Boris's ousting with books and movies. It's disgusting. Boris was by far the best leader, at least since Thatcher, and we need him back for the confidence of the country.
And Corinne says, Johnson was the worst PM this country has ever seen. Living over the brush at number 10 said, and terrible examples to our young people. So there you go, terrible.
And she's...
Can't please everyone.
Corinne's also complaining about his policies on net zero and not doing anything about immigration. So we've got a mix of opinions about Boris this morning, but keep those views coming in. We love reading them.
And we're again joined in the studio by historian, writer and broadcaster Dr. Tessa Dunlop to look at what you've seen in the papers today.
Well, can we just quickly pick up on Liverpool's success? You must be fizzing about this.
I'm delighted.
Bucks fizzing.
Bucks, yeah. That's
totally
another guest later.
Of course, I think Glasgow was the favourite. In the end, Liverpool have clinched it. I mean, the musical heritage arguably stands alone, but also this link with Odessa, because, of course, it was all about how Ukrainian can you be, Ukraine, of course, being the winner of Eurovision earlier this year. But actually, I just love it because it's a bit of a hit in the arm for Liverpool. It was stripped of its UNESCO status earlier this year. Very controversial decision, sort of taken in secret in China by the UN. You know, it's got that stunning waterfront, the Liver building.
The three graces.
Yeah, the three graces. I think it's got the largest number of Grade 1 listed buildings anywhere in Britain, and apparently developments had compromised that waterfront, and so it was stripped. But the wonderful thing is, of course, it's going to be further development, isn't it, to cater for the Eurovision village of about 11,000 people, apparently.
And you're quite right, it was a debate in the city. These wonderful buildings were going to remain. People knew they were there, they were going to come. But you know what? We did actually have to develop the city too, so we could carry on growing and not be a sort of a historical town. So there was a debate for a long period of time. But you're quite right. We are all, delighted that it's come there. And I think, what the mayor say? Biggest party ever.
Yeah, can't wait.
Which in Liverpool, that's a big promise. They seem to have those every weekend from what I've seen.
Phil, you're going to have to get your dancing shoes on, eh?
About that.
Maybe you could do a live broadcast. It's from what was the Echo Arena, I think,
That's
the
right.
M&S.
Yeah, exactly. A massive arena.
Live singing. That's the... Now, I saw in the Daily Star today, Tessa, page 21, this caught my eye. A Malmo footballer, Mohamed Boya Touré, skipped his own wedding to go to pre-season training, and he sent his brother as a substitute for the wedding to stand in as the bridegroom.
Can the Star verify its sources on that? It seems ridiculous.
It says that he posed for pictures with his bride to be ahead of the ceremony to make it look as if he was there, and then flew 5,000 miles to Sweden to begin his career with Malmo. And he says he was keen to make a good impression following his transfer.
So hang on, the wedding kiss that the Star's displaying there, is that with the brother-in-law or with him?
It maybe substitutes all kinds of things with his brother.
Back on the bench. Yeah.
It makes you wonder whether or not the wedding's legal.
Well, I was going to say that.
Actually there for it.
What was the priest, the reverend, or whoever was doing? What were they thinking? Is what I'm saying. Is if you had a body double.
But I mean, dedication to your job, actually, sort of going to your job instead of going to your wedding is quite impressive. So if anyone's got any examples where they've been so dedicated to their job, they've sort of skipped. Where I would love to hear about I'd love to hear that. That's absolutely terrific stuff.
And this one I just thought was a bit of fun. Gina Davis has revealed that she chose Brad Pitt over George Clooney, and she rebuffed the advances of Jack Nicholson. OK, I get that one. Could have been an age differential there, though I think Jack Nicholson a bit of a party animal. So I'm just going to ask Tess, who would you have gone for? With Pitt or Clooney?
I know who you would have gone for. Because you've got a bit of a Clooney lookalike in Phil.
Thank you very much.
Me over both
Clooney.
of them. Over both of them.
Silver Fox Clooney. The looks going down. I've always been more of a Pitt man, although he wore that skirt, you know, in Berlin to advertise The Bullet. I think it's The Bullet, his latest film. I thought that was a step too far. And put your knees away. He's over 50 now.
Prime colours a lot, hasn't he? Wearing the same colour throughout. No, he's not looking his best. No. But I have to say, in the past, he has looked his best. Sorry, Bill.
Who are you going for? Brad Pitt?
Obviously the Clooney lookalike. But no, otherwise would have gone for Brad Pitt, if I'm being honest.
Are you saying that
Clooney's too smooth?
I'm just going to put it out there that I think both of them are past their prime. Sorry, forgive me.
But obviously not Phil.
He's coming into his own like a fine wine.
Nice one.
Are you saying it wasn't
I'm going to learn some of these.
My boyish good looks that
won me over? No. That's exactly what I'm going to say, Phil.
On boyish good looks, can we check in with the new Prince of Wales, please? Because some in Wales are not happy about the prince that has apparently been imposed upon them by the new king. Kate and Wills, of course, have been out and about this week. They went to Northern Ireland. Kate had a little bit of heckling, but nothing she couldn't handle with her auburn locks. She just swished on. Meanwhile, the New Guardian, it is, perhaps predictably, says no Prince of Wales. Welsh Council votes to get rid of William's title. Now, this is significant because Gwynedd, I think, is the council in question is, of course, the home of Carnarvon Castle, which is where the last investiture took place. And they're getting all very huffy about the idea of William's investiture. But, of course, this is an invented tradition. We had a couple in the last century, but you don't have to have a great big hoo-ha and lots of cameras and an investiture. William could just sort of slide in and do his bit. You know, we don't need to... We've already got a coronation on the horizon.
Why are they so worked up about it? I mean, because I thought that even you know, Scotland and Wales, that people that want independence, I've always thought wanted to keep the monarchy.
No, Phil.
Am I out of...
You're reading the wrong papers.
Yeah, that's probably true.
This is what's so interesting, sort of papering over the cracks. I thought the coverage of the Queen's funeral was very interesting because it's very one note and we were unified and everyone, Republicans and monarchists alike, recognised her service. But actually, if you drilled into the figures, about 50% of Wales are anti-monarchy. Ditto in Scotland. But this, recently, you'd be forgiven for not thinking that was the case. And in Wales, of course, they're arguing that the last real Prince of Wales was Owen Glendower, that this imposition of an English, as they see it, monarchy is not something they wanted. I think that actually in this case, Wills and Kate are a bit of a political football, because it's a kick at Westminster, isn't it, from Wales wanting to assert their independence of spirit, if nothing else. And I always feel a bit sorry, actually, for the royal family when they come in for a drubbing here, because they're apolitical figures, really. But if you're anti the union and you're a symbol of that union, which they are, I suppose it's inevitable.
Well, fair. I didn't realise they were so anti-royal family.
Yeah, just to give it to you, 46 Gwynedd councillors voted for the abolition of the title, with 4 against and 4 abstaining.
Politicians don't always have the voice of the people, though. You might find more of the people on the ground have a different view there.
It must be a great place to live if the councillors have got nothing better to do than pass motions on things like that.
Come on, let us know, Wales. I'd be interested to hear.
Well, fair point. Sometimes the people who represent you might not share your views. Now, just a quick one here, because I didn't know how this became such a big story. Note to the nanny state, PM scraps the energy-saving advice. So Jacob Rees-Mogg was wanting to put out this energy-saving advice. I personally thought it was a good idea. And if you believe in giving out information, educating people so they can choose what you want to do, which I'd say was a Conservative philosophy, you would agree with it. And it was just tips on how to save money. And you've had people like the Institute of Economic Affairs coming out agreeing with it, Taxpayers Alliance agreeing with it. I agree with it. Anybody else?
I personally feel that we have a resources shortage, irrespective of the war in Ukraine. There was already a bit of a resources crisis. Looking down the tunnel of the 21st century, quite a lot of interesting stuff's been written about this. This is a new century, it's a new landscape. So if you're encouraged to switch the lights out and work out when is a better time to put your washing machine on, arguably that's future-proofing, not just against Putin in this war, but longer term, while we work out how to switch from fossils to renewables. Who switches the lights out in Your house, then?
I'm usually the one who's saving energy in our house.
I switch.
Particularly the heating.
I was going to say, I switch the lights off, but I like the heating on. He's always switching
But
the
why
heating
can't
off.
you put a thermal vest under the tangerine top?
And I do. Oh, by the way, I wear thermals, long johns, T-shirts. I do not skimp, do I, on clothes, jumpers? I wear many clothes, so I do that.
I know, but that is, it might, I think, become a 20th century luxury, the idea of drifting around in lingerie in our centrally heated homes. That could well be a thing of the past.
I think so, and not every room heated. If you're only in the one room, just heat that. Why have all that money being thrown away in other rooms? Oh, I totally agree with you. So we're both into giving information tips on how to save
50
money.
million quid the campaign would have cost, which, quite frankly, you could argue, looking at their current lending or borrowing statistics, is small fry, really.
Tessa, thank you very much indeed.
Is that it?
That's it.
Oh.
That's it. You're done.
But we'll have you back. How about that?
Have you back. Exactly. Now, Halifax have said that rising mortgage costs and the ongoing cost of living crisis will push UK house prices down more sharply in the coming months, after prices dipped by 0.1% last month.
The director of Halifax Mortgages, Kim Kennard, said the prospect of interest rates continuing to rise sharply, plus the impact in recent weeks of higher mortgage borrowing costs on affordability, are likely to exert more significant downward pressures on house prices in the months ahead.
So what is the current situation like for people trying to get their first step on the property ladder? Joining us now is mortgage expert Andrew Milnes. Andrew, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. You don't look old enough, Andrew, but you've got 30 years experience in the...
You see, there was nearly an insult there, and then it went to a compliment.
He doesn't look old enough, does he? I just wondered how this particular time compared with all the other previous mortgage squeezes that you must have experienced.
Well, good morning, guys, and thanks for asking my views here. 36 years, Phil. So, I've been through a few tumultuous times in the industry. And how does it compare? It's very, very different because we don't at the moment have a liquidity crisis. In 2007, 2008, in the last recession, we had a liquidity crisis and the banks simply didn't have money to lend. At the moment, they have money to lend. They want to lend money. Let's be honest, they make money by lending money. So it's a slightly different scenario. And yes, the cost of borrowing's risen. We can't avoid that. The cost of borrowing has risen over the last sort of 3 or 4 months. But actually, if we take an average over the last 15 or 20 years, it's still fairly affordable. What's driving these increases, though, and the problem we've got is property prices. And there's a bigger problem there in terms of supply and demand around property. And we could talk long and hard about that issue if we wanted to. I know you want my opinion on the mortgage market at the moment, and I think it's pretty clear from where we sit as brokers. In the broker community, I don't think we've been busier than ever in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks since the fiscal statement. Interest rates were rising prior to the Chancellor's fiscal statement, but what that did, it added fuel to the fire and it accelerated things. Lenders quite rightly reassessed their marketplace and withdrew an awful lot of products. And that's what led to the media scandal about, you're not going to be able to get a mortgage offers are going to be withdrawn, people can't borrow money. And I have to say, a lot of it was media hype. Please don't believe everything that you read in the media. There's a real clear message here, is take some expert advice. We arrange hundreds of mortgages every month, and we haven't yet had one mortgage offer withdrawn by a lender in the current climate.
So if someone is coming out of a fixed rate deal or looking to remortgage or looking to get the first mortgage, what advice would you give to them at the moment?
Well, I think the first thing is don't panic. Lenders, if you're looking to remortgage at the moment, very, very sadly, you're probably going to see your payments go up. Okay, that's fact. There's not a lot we can do about that. But lenders, as a last resort, want to cause problems and to repossess properties and take properties off people. So I think the key message is don't panic. Don't bury your head in the sand. Talk to the experts, talk to your own bank, talk to brokers like myself, and see what the market can offer. And there's a number of ways we can perhaps help people in these situations. Whilst it's not ideal, because we all like to think we'll pay our debt down and pay our mortgage off, one of the ways we can help people is perhaps looking to extend the mortgage term if people are young enough to do that. Another way might be to put part of the mortgage onto an interest-only basis if their lender will allow it, to reduce the outgoings. And again, it's not ideal, but in a short-term scenario where we think rates are going to be higher for the next 2 to 3 years, it might work. The key message, though, is to speak to people. I do know that there's conversations going on with a number of lenders at the moment, and perhaps looking at something similar to what we had in the pandemic, which is a mortgage holiday scenario for people. And again, not ideal, But if it helps people through these tricky times, then it could be a good option.
I'm reading the papers this morning, two things, which refers back to what you were saying before, maybe about the cost of housing, and that could be it. But I think it said the amounts that borrowers are giving, they're shrinking that down, giving less than what you wanted. And then the other thing they're saying is, could it be better to have a tracker mortgage rather than a fixed rate mortgage?
Well, I'll start with your second point, Esther, because that's the million-dollar question at the moment. It really is, and it's driven by circumstances. I think if you can factor in and afford a potential rate rise at the moment, then undoubtedly a tracker deal or a discounted deal linked to a lender's variable rate is going to be a cheaper option for you. But if you want security in your payments and you want to know that's exactly what I'm paying and it's not going to alter whatever the economic outlook, whatever happens in the UK, whatever colour we have in charge, that sort of thing, then I think you've got to opt for a fixed option. So that answers your first point. Your second point. Your first point's really valid as well. The affordability scenario, lenders are being prudent. So I started this by saying lenders want to lend money. We don't have a liquidity crisis. But they are being prudent. They're looking at affordability. They're looking at your mortgage payment as a percentage of your take-home pay. They're using up-to-date Office of National Statistics figures to look at your spend on utilities, and quite rightly so, because that's increased massively over the last 6 to 12 months. So I think it's a prudent scenario, and it's perhaps something, and Phil, you touched on it earlier, saying I didn't look old enough, but I was around in the early 90s where, in essence, if you could sign your name, you could get a mortgage. And nowadays, quite sensibly, we're looking at much more things when we're actually finding out whether or not a lender's happy to lend to a customer.
I know you've got God's work to do and going to watch Bradford City play football this afternoon, so thank you very much for joining us. Cheer them on for me as well, but thank you for joining us this morning.
You've got a big cross to bear there, then. Now, coming up after the break, we'll be joined by a man who has been described as the world's leading rock and metal writer to discuss the enduring legacy of the Beatles as their first single, Love Me Do, turns 60. Don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens,
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 11:26. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Esther, what have you got?
Well, I've got here, hello, Esther and Phil. This is from Sue. The illegal and ballooning illegal immigration issue must not be underestimated. It is central to the blue-collar vote. If Suella does what she's promised, with speed, she will most definitely win the Conservatives the next general election. So take heed from what Sue has to say. Suella.
Colin says if the Tories had 148 more Lee Andersons, they would not be in the situation they are now. Someone who speaks basic good common sense such as Lee is an asset to the party.
Lucas says here, I'm in America. Tax cuts and limited government are the way forward. If the UK and the US governments would just allow people to succeed, then both of our governments would be successful.
And Kay said, this morning you were interviewing an author on Boris. Unfortunately, I only turned on halfway through. Kay, only turned on halfway through. What on earth were you doing before that? So did not catch the name of the book or the author. Can you help? We can help, Kay. We help by saying tune in from the start in future. That's how we're going to help you. But the author's Andrew Jimson. Just for that public... But that's the last time I'm saying it. I don't want to hear anyone else is tuning in late.
But this week, the Beatles' debut single, Love Me Do, turned 60 years old.
It was released on the 5th of October 1962, reaching number 17 in the UK charts, and marked arguably the most important moment in British music history.
To mark the occasion, two acts were invited into Sir Paul McCartney's childhood home to record versions of the song where it was written there by Sir Paul and John Lennon.
Well, join us now to discuss the enduring legacy of the Beatles is a man who has been described as the world's leading rock and metal writer, Mick Wall. Mick, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I've got a Scouser sat next to me here. So, where do you rank the Beatles in the sort of in history, in music history? Where are they for you?
Well, there's none higher. You know, I mean, for me, they're the Shakespeare of pop, in the sense that before the Beatles, the world was completely different, not just pop music, but the way young people live their lives. If it was just purely on the music, the Beatles would still be the biggest, most influential group that ever existed, purely by dint of the fact that they wrote their own songs, which was completely unheard of before them. But also the fact that, you know, they went from, you know, wearing the Beatles suits and appearing on telly in black and white, right through the whole, well, inspired the whole cultural revolution of the 60s, not only just in terms of psychedelic pop music, but even on a track like Eleanor Rigby, where they're using a string quartet. They're writing about situations, they're writing lyrics that you can read as you would poetry and still enjoy. That just hadn't existed before the Beatles. Arguably, it didn't need to exist. We'd have been perfectly happy with some lovely pop songs, but they came along and just tore up the rule book and reinvented pop music. But at the same time, and I know because I was a young boy at school at the time, they literally changed everything. You know, there was the big controversy about all their hair touches their collars. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? All those conversations were relevant before they came along, and then quickly became obsolete afterwards. And if you turn at every turn, there's something extraordinary. The fact that they all could sing, they all sang #1 records. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
And Mick, you said something interesting there, that they brought in like a string quartet into their music. They were experimental. And it was interesting. When Phil and I got married 2 years ago, we had played at our wedding All You Need Is Love. And the organist, he had lots of other pieces of music to choose from. And he said, this is so wonderful. I can actually play that Beatles song. And it was one of the country, top organists there. And that's what he said I would sooner play, didn't he, out of a list of songs, was All You Need Is Love. So going back to this song now, which is 60 years old, Love Me Do, is there anything there that set the template, really, for other young groups to come forward? Something simple, something easy, but actually a global hit?
It was definitely, I think, the simplest song they ever wrote. I mean, Paul McCartney wrote most of it when he was still a teenager at school. John came in and added the middle eight. But if you think of Love Me Do, I Love You, I'll Be True, this is as simple and basic as it gets. And really, they were trying to kind of emulate the Everly Brothers with the duet lead vocal, the sound they were going for. So it was very simple, very approachable. I think where they really began to influence other groups were with the singles that came straight afterwards. She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Can't Buy Me Love. The list is almost endless. They had about 18 number one records in this country and more in America. And I think, you look at the Rolling Stones, who'd never written a song until Lennon and McCartney wrote I Want to Be Your Man for them. And after that, they were up and running, figuring, well, if these guys from Liverpool can do it, we can do it. Only no one could do it like Lennon and McCartney, and then or now.
Yeah, I'm quite interested in the relationship between John Lennon and Paul McCartney. What was that really like, Mick?
Well, I mean, John was the myopic, chip on a shoulder, it's my band, I'm the boss. And to be honest, every successful group has one of those. In the Rolling Stones, it's Mick Jagger. In other groups, there's always one guy who cracks the whip. And it's really important because they don't become musicians because they want to work hard all day and all night. They're looking for something easy and fun to do. Lennon was a hard taskmaster, but McCartney, it was like that yin and yang thing, night and day, very opposites, but opposites attract. And it either has spectacular results, as we saw with John and Paul, and by the end, when it starts to fall apart, that's when it turns catastrophic and ugly, and they don't speak to each other again for 10 years. So they were very, very different, but they fitted perfectly.
And finally, quickly, favourite Beatles song?
Too many. Yesterday has always been a big one for me. But honestly, Let It Be, Something. Of the early period, She Loves You. She Loves You. That's the big one for me.
Well, we're going to end on that. She Loves You. Mick Wall, thank you very much indeed there. Absolutely
Favourite
the
Beatles
case.
song?
Favourite Beatles song? I like Eleanor Rigby. I like the ones with the words, or Penny Lane. I love all the words. I thought they were beautiful.
I like Help. I need it most days. Coming up after the break, we'll be talking about World Mental Health Day, which takes place this Monday. But first it's time for your latest headlines with Polly.
Philip, thank you, and hello to you. 7 people are now known to have lost their lives, and the number of dead is expected to rise after an explosion at a petrol station in Ireland last evening. Many people were injured, and the emergency services are still working to look for victims trapped at the site at Creesla in County Donegal. It's understood the petrol station was the hub of the village in a tight-knit community, and it's being reported children may be among the dead. The current rescue operation likely to change to a recovery mission this morning, with emergency services already having worked through the night. And a large explosion has destroyed the only road bridge linking occupied Crimea and Russia and heavily damaged an adjacent rail bridge. Footage widely shared online shows an explosion on the bridge, which is believed to have taken place early on this morning. Travel across the bridge now impossible. An advisor to Ukrainian president describing the incident as the beginning, but not directly attributing responsibility to the Ukrainian authorities. Here, around only 1 in 5 trains expected to run normally today across Scotland, England and Wales. Members of the RMT union staging their 8th strike today in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The train's operator, chief negotiator Tim Shoveler, says passengers should only travel by train if absolutely necessary. The RMT's General Secretary Mick Lynch warning of further strikes to come.
We will adapt and negotiate to new conditions, and we've adapted new technology all along. But that doesn't explain why these members standing behind me now haven't had a pay rise for 3 years, while the companies are extracting £500 million in profit last year.
Now, thousands of people will form a human chain around Parliament today, calling for the release of the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange. Mr. Assange is currently being held in Belmarsh Prison in London amid a legal battle to avoid extradition to the United States, where he's wanted over a leak of secret military information. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Now back to Esther and Philip.
Yes, welcome back. Lots of views coming in. Phil?
Adrian says, I'm right to inform you that your guest who states many Welsh people are against the monarchy is totally wrong, and there is only a small minority that supports independence. Plaid Cymru are a minor political party in Wales and puppets to Drakeford and Welsh Labour.
Yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Ask the people, ask the people. It isn't always the same as what the politicians say. Can I point out that Gwynedd holds some of the only 3 Plaid Cymru seats? There are 40 Westminster MPs in Wales, only 3 Plaid Cymru. Ask the rest of Wales the question. That is Linda saying exactly the same thing. Ask the people, and we do on the People's Channel.
And lots of comments about the Beatles. Jeff says the Beatles did not write all their own songs. They sang, as did the Rolling Stones. Many of the songs written were by the true king of rock and roll, Chuck Berry.
I have to say the Beatles, Lennon and McCartney, did write loads and loads of songs. Yes, they did. And obviously George Harrison as well. And Ringo did one, didn't he? The Yellow Submarine. That was his.
Dave from Reading, controversial Dave. Give me the Rolling Stones any day, he said.
That's fine. You can have them. I'll have the Beatles. Now, the World Health Organization recognises World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October every year, with the theme this year focusing on making mental health and well-being a global priority for all.
But of course, there are those with alternative approaches to mental health and treatment, including our next guest, therapist John Cottrell, who says people need to stop being a meal ticket for their therapists, who he feels indulge their patients for financial gain. John, welcome to the show. Are you saying that all of this sort of explosion of mental health is part of the snowflake generation rather than it being genuine mental health problems?
Well, I think the term mental health is where we probably need to look first. It's great that people are talking about things, that it's not so bad anymore, particularly for a man to say, I've got a problem. But mental implies there's something wrong with your head, and health implies that there's some kind of medication required. And I don't believe either are true. I think for the vast majority of people who are reporting a so-called mental health problem, it's really to do with their emotion. So the question isn't then what's wrong with you, it's actually what's happened to you. And so if we can get people to keep talking to their friends, to their family, and to get people to realise that it's very often repressed emotion that's the cause of problems, then they don't need medication, don't need to go and see a therapist over a long period of time to talk about stuff. You can talk about stuff with your friends. If you want to go and see a therapist, that's absolutely cool. And there are some really, really good ones. But too many people I see say, I've been seeing a therapist for years. And I'm saying, well, what happens when you stop? I couldn't stop because my problems would get worse. So it doesn't feel, from an engineer's perspective, and that's my background, that we're actually getting to the root cause of the problem. And I think the root cause for many people is actually their emotions.
So is it possible that, you know, for example, employers don't do enough to try and help their members of staff who say they've got mental health issues? I mean, I read somewhere that the Mental Health Foundation said that the cost of mental health problems is £1,652 per employee per year. So is there more that employers could do to help before it gets to the point of going to a therapist?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, we've got to look at the work environment and ask ourselves, is that conducive to good health, to good emotions? We talk about emotional intelligence, but we don't really talk about emotional health. So having a management style, if you like, which is predicated on the whole person, rather than just demanding more and more, that requires managers to be less scared of having people speak up and having a more participative approach. And when you do let people participate, well, funnily enough, their performance at work gets better and the so-called mental health will be better too. So these two things should be going hand in glove. Better productivity and better mental health go together.
You talked about before it'd be better if we were speaking maybe more to our friends and not having to go to a sort of a therapist, which is obviously an industry in its own right. So I would have thought more people are talking more than ever before. You know, they're writing stuff, they're talking about stuff, you know, they're emoting on every level. Is it that we've become more of a victim society, therefore we want to find something wrong with ourselves as well?
Well, that's a really interesting point and potentially a controversial one. I think it was the American psychiatrist, I think it was an author and psychiatrist, I think his name was Peck, said his one despair from professional practice is people refusing to take personal responsibility. And I think that's where we can all sort of take a leaf from his book and say, well, how am I not taking personal responsibility here? Am I trying to blame something? Am I trying to make an excuse? Or am I really going to own my situation and work out for myself what I can do? Now, it may be that people do need help to take those steps. But it really says if you can put yourself at cause for what's going on in your life, then you've got a much better chance of being able to do something about it.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
I liked his view there on the world, that sort of taking responsibility. Very good. Coming up after the break, we'll be discussing the Eurovision Song Contest with the one and only Cheryl Baker. So don't go anywhere.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's almost 11:45. With the news that the Eurovision 2023 will be held in Liverpool, we'll be joined by Cheryl Baker of Bucks Fizz fame, who won the singing contest back in 1981. Cheryl.
Thanks for joining us. How do you feel about Liverpool becoming the host? I think you were Dublin when you won. How do you feel about Liverpool being the host city?
I'm just thrilled that it's in the United Kingdom. I'm really happy for Liverpool. I've already contacted Kate Robbins and Sonia saying, have you got a spare room for me? I just think it's fantastic. It's always been, Brighton, Edinburgh, Birmingham, London. It's about time that it went to the northwest. So I'm really thrilled for Liverpool.
Are you okay? Can you take your sleeping bag up there? Have one of them offered you a room?
Not yet, but I will keep on at them. I haven't said so much. Should we get a camper van and just drive up there?
So obviously it must bring back memories of 1981 and back to that evening when it was. I was looking back at it, Cheryl. It was quite a narrow. It was 4 points, I think, the margin of victories. It must have been quite a nail-biting evening. When was it then you sort of, during the course of the evening, that you thought, you know what, I think we're going to win this?
The last vote. It's true, it was so nerve-wracking. And the very last vote, I think it was Sweden, I can't remember, gave us enough points that meant that Germany couldn't catch us. And Terry Wogan's line is... I think they've done it. I don't think they can be beat. In fact, I'm sure they can't be beat. And so that was the moment. And it was literally that last vote that did it all for us. And I say to this day that those 4 points were down to the skirts coming off.
So 50 million records later, and you've got another album now out as well, and Hayley's with it, and I know you've been making a documentary, and I think she was watching some of it as well. So with your new album, what are you hoping to do in the next just couple of years?
Oh, blimey, next couple of years, do another album for a start. But we did it with the amazing Mike Stock, who's an absolute genius in the studio for, the Stock Aitken and Waterman days. And this is our 4th album with him. It's all brand new songs. My daughter wrote a song on it, which I'm thrilled about. Jay wrote a song. There's a Paul McCartney song, touching on to Liverpool there. It's great, and we all love it. It was great working with Hayley on the documentary, which is like the making.
I have to say, my favourite song, Treasure Forever, is an absolute classic. That's my favourite on there. But you're right, it's all thanks to Mike Stock from Stock Aitken and Waterman fame. So, no, it's really good. Congratulations to you all. And I know Jay's in Barbados at the moment, isn't she? We're not having that. I'm not OK with that one. I'm
not jealous at all.
But I always like when a documentary is being made, what happens in the sort of in behind the scenes.
Wait till you see it. We filmed it for 3 days, didn't we, Cheryl?
I'm interested in seeing how it's all cut together because we haven't seen. I don't know what everyone else said about me or what they said. What I've said about them. I'm really interested to see it myself. So yeah, it should be it's interesting watching. Yeah.
Cheryl, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people banging on your door to ask what makes a winning Eurovision song before the contest next year, so keep those secrets to yourself.
The album is Everything Under the Sun. Is that right? Everything Under the Sun. That's what we want.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I've got to say, I like The Land of Make-Believe as a book.
I like that one too. Cheryl will teach you the dance routine to that if you're lucky.
No, I don't think she would.
No, probably not actually with your dancing skills.
She might teach you, but she wouldn't teach me. Aidan, good to see you here as well.
I met Cheryl Baker at the Pembroke Hotel in Blackpool in 1987, got her autograph.
Did you?
Yeah, I should have asked if she remembered me. I look a bit different then.
Have you still got the autograph?
No, I don't think so, actually.
I'll bet you have.
It's on the back of a Pembroke Hotel.
Your jokes are about as old as that.
I was going to say. Yes, Esther.
Probably. No, I got a good one. I had a good one this morning, didn't I? I said, went to the video shop.
Didn't have a good one this morning.
Went to the video shop and ordered Batman Forever. And they said, no, it's got to be... Can I have Batman Forever? They said, no, it's got to be back on Monday.
Anyway, let's get back to something you know more about, and that's the boxing.
I do. A farcical week for the sport. That's what you can say. Farcical is probably a nice way of putting it. Is borderline shameful, actually, because Conor Benn failed a drugs test, which we know about on Wednesday. His promoters said that this fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. would still go ahead tonight, due to be a sellout, a pay-per-view event at the O2, undercard as well, about 7 fights. But he found an adverse analytical finding, which was a fertility drug, which also boosts testosterone. Now, the promoter still said the fight was going to go ahead. Now, with all the history of the Eubanks and the Benns and the disastrous fights they took part in 30 years ago when certain fighters' opponents ended up with brain damage, you've got to be really careful about putting someone in who's tested positive for a drugs test. And so to still try and get it over the line and get the fight on, the British Boxing Board of Control had to step in and say, this isn't happening. They still tried after that to work out ways of getting the fight on. There was even talk they'd go to Luxembourg to try and get a licence issued there. That didn't happen, thankfully. But the upshot is that the fight is off today, and we're looking now at Conor Benn facing, it's possible, according to this morning's paper, that he could be looking at a 4-year ban. I
mean, 4-year ban, right? But equally, I mean, it was 10, 15 million pounds, millions and millions of pounds. Could it be possible he could be sued? I mean, he really is the person who's brought the fight to an end.
It's possible, but then it may depend on the results of the B sample, Esther. That's the thing. The more immediate concern is all those fights that are happening tonight. We're talking about probably 14, 16 fighters who spent 3 months in camp.
Exactly.
Now, because officially there was no weigh-in yesterday, the rules are if there's no weigh-in, if you don't get to the weigh-in, then you don't get paid. Now, these fighters will have laid out all sorts of expenses, paying their trainers, paying their nutritionists, all their fitness coaches, any of their sparring partners, anybody else, and they usually travel overseas as well. So Eddie Hearn, the matchroom promoter, is now under pressure to try and deliver a refund to those guys. We'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks, I guess.
Now, Hayley, I was reading about Ryland Clark, and he was saying that he should have had, I don't know why I thought this was important, but he said he should have had a pre-nup agreement. What?
I think that's a good idea, don't you?
What's happened? Why is
Well, the thing is, he's been through a really tough time, poor Ryland. We love Ryland. I think he's just feeling a bit disheartened, and he said it's been through like the worst time of his life, and he says he thinks it's hard to find love when he's in the public eye. And it's true, because you see people that just want to get on the back of his fame, but do they actually want the love? So I think actually it is a good idea in this day and age
to have a prenup.
Yeah.
Did you ask that, film? Is it all this fame and people knowing? Is that why I fell for you? Is that what it was?
I didn't know if it was my boyish good looks or my fame, to be perfectly honest. It was clearly one or the other.
Well, it certainly wasn't your money either.
Brutal.
But anyway, prenups important.
I think so, because I think it's quite a sensible thing to do.
Are they worth anything, though, in court?
It's not really very romantic, though, is it?
It's not romantic, but have you got to think with your head or your heart?
Yeah, but I've got a better one. Some people say, what I'd like you to do is meet my friends, and there's like a X Factor friends meet for the girlfriend or the boyfriend or whoever to check, really, they're not blinded by, I don't know, infatuation, but actually, they do like them, they do get on, they've got the right personality. So how about that, then? Instead of a prenup, a 3-mate panel checkout.
I think mums, though, I just need my mum. Yeah. My mum gets it right every time.
Well, there you go.
And the dog. The dog's a really good judge of character as well.
Sure. Is it a bit off-putting, though, for the potential boyfriend if the mum's
Well, that's what they've got to do.
I've charmed a few mothers in my time. They're the key.
In your opinion, Aidan?
No.
Just the mother, though.
Yeah, daughter gone.
No, we've also had the lineup for Dancing on Ice.
Bring it on. Joey Essex is going to be the star this year. I mean, he's going to be doing the backflips, isn't he, on ice? I just think it's quite dangerous, though. You go on Strictly, and you're like, I might pull my hamstring. On Dancing on Ice, you get serious injuries, don't you? But my question is Holly and Phil going to be presenting it this year?
Good point.
Because I haven't seen that in writing.
They're in front of the queue.
I can't keep up with all these. These.
You've got to keep on top of it, Phil. It's
reality shows. There seems to be a new one out every.
I know, but
the dancing, the singing.
But it's winter, and that's what we need.
Skating.
You need to stay in, get a Deliveroo, watch Dancing on Ice, life complete.
How's Tony Adams getting on?
He's doing well, actually. I thought he would have got knocked out, but Kay Adams got knocked out on Saturday.
Maybe they got voted for the wrong one by accident. Yeah.
Maybe.
And Aidan?
Bit of sport today, bit of football. Of course, Manchester City at home to Southampton. Southampton under... That's where you're from, Hayley, isn't it?
Hey.
So they're going to Man City today. They're going to be...
thrashed?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Possibly. Well, the interesting thing is Erling Haaland. You can see the Manchester City team line up there. Erling Haaland is top left for the benefit of our radio listeners, but he's got 14 goals in just 8 games. There's talk that he could get as high as 100 before the end of the season. Now, Southampton are in real trouble at the moment. They've not had a good run of form at all. The manager's under pressure. They might just be the ideal opponents for him to take him to about another hat-trick, you'd have thought.
He's unbelievable, isn't he?
Well,
I mean, he is truly unbelievable.
He is, but...
Three hat-tricks on the trot.
He got two in the week and got taken off at half-time.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, look, Aidan, thank you very much indeed. Hayley, again, thank you very much indeed, because that is all we have got time for today. I know you can't believe it. You don't want us to go, do you? Well, we're going to have to go because you've got Alistair Stewart and friends up next, but we will be back next week. So thank you very much indeed from everybody here. As I said, don't go away. Next, it's the weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's the weekend and it's a chilly start for some, but plenty of sunshine this morning and most places are going to stay dry and fine through the day. There is more wind and rain on the way, and that's for later Sunday, courtesy of this low and this weather system waiting in the wings in the Atlantic. But ahead of that, a ridge of high pressure building in following the clearance of Friday's cold front that's pushing into the continent. Most places are waking up to bright skies, but a bit of a chill in the air. Nevertheless, it will soon warm up. And for England, Wales, southern and eastern Scotland, as well as much of Northern Ireland, it's going to stay dry through the day. 1 or 2 showers perhaps first thing for northwest England, but otherwise sunny spells and feeling pleasant enough in the sunshine with lighter winds 16 to 18 Celsius. Not so much the case for northern and western Scotland. We've got further showers to come through the day here and thickening cloud as well as a freshening breeze by the end of the day.